Welcome to Talking Absolute Worship. We have gathered some of the foremost minds of the Southwest Synod to help us with James and Psalms and Numbers and Mark's Gospel. And heading us off in hopefully the right direction is Robert. Where are you thinking of going with these readings, with your preaching?
Well, I was looking at the Gospel and Numbers, and it's the first line in the Gospel. I was just taken back to school. Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons, and I thought, you know, those kids you had at school are going, sir, he's done such and such. Tell him off, sir, you know. And the same's happening with Moses, it seems. You know, they're going, they're complaining at the end. Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp, you know, stop it. And it seems to be a lot of people demanding that things are stopped and that people have stopped doing things. And Jesus is saying, no. Don't stop him. No one who does a deed of power in my name will be able soon afterwards to speak evil of me. And I thought how that's about inclusivity. It's about all of us doing our part and working alongside each other instead of looking at, I mean, that's what is it you used to say to kids who rushed up in the playground and said, sir, you used to say something like, well, don't worry about them. You just go off and do your thing, you know? And the way in Numbers he responds, it's Moses said, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit upon them. So it's like as though instead of not, oh, you can't do it, or you're doing it the wrong way, it's about us all working together. That was the sense I had, you know, and the notes I was looking at were, you know, where does it say, if somebody's for us, who can be against us, that sort of stuff, you know. So that was the sort of sense I had. And then on the same sort of thing, the idea that it isn't all down to one person, that we all are together in this. So about inclusivity and togetherness, and not picking out people, don't discourage others, don't create conflict, because that's what they're trying to do, isn't it? You know, sir, work together for good. If anybody helps, it's a good thing. Everyone has a place. And then I began to think about all of us, and I suppose I was thinking about a church context. I've been on bridge builders courses where you talk about the fact that that person who's causing the problem may well be because of their personality type, they're in the wrong job. And I thought about the Myers-Briggs thing, and about how if people look at their personalities, they can find out where they would fit. I mean, I don't think you could do a Myers-Briggs on the whole congregation, but it's something to think about. That's so that was briefly where I was thinking what it was about for me.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I mean, whoever isn't against us is for us. I just think it's just a fascinating thing to sort of play with, isn't it? And particularly as churches do this, don't they? Churches jealously hold on to stuff that they do. I'm thinking of some of the obvious stuff in United Reformed churches, like fair trade, for instance. Sir, Sainsbury's is selling fair trade tea now. That's what we do. And you know, whoever isn't against us is for us. You think, well, actually, so that opens up a whole realm of possibilities, doesn't it? I think sometimes as Christians we're so tempted to do our thing, and so if you get sort of CND, then you get Christian CND, or if you get Amnesty International, you get Christian Amnesty International, or if you get an aid agency, or I'm going to say Christian aid because that's slightly different, but you get a Christian version of it, and that's the one that we'll do. Whereas it almost sounds like Jesus is saying, well, there's loads of people out there who have the same spirit in that sense, who have my spirit, who are doing stuff in my name. They might not have named it, they might not know it, but they're doing stuff in my name. I don't know if this is going too far with this, but what does that doing it in my name mean? Does it mean that people are actually acting in a Christ-like way without defining themselves as Christian, and they are allies and we should be alongside them? Yeah, Robert.
Oh, it just reminds me, I think I might have said this before, but it's going into a school when I was at my last church and standing in the entrance hall and looking at all of the posters on the walls. And it struck me that in a way, Christian values in that environment were sort of endemic. And so they almost, people say, well, it's not a church school. But you think, but it is. It's there. It's just unspoken, but it's there. And in a sense, that whoever is not against us is for us. And somehow, the thing we've gone wrong is turning it into a religion, which then gives people something to reject, almost, doesn't it? That's a bit off the point, but you made me think of that.
Yeah, listen.
Carolyn Brown, one of my go-to places in worshiping with children, says this: the disciples point out people who are healing in Jesus' name but are not members of their group. So identify others working for the public good in your community. She says especially other churches, but I'd say possibly other churches. Celebrate what all are doing. Make sure the children know these other groups are not enemies, but share the building of the kingdom. I think it's a really good exercise to do with people, isn't it? To just say, so who are the people who are working for public good in the community? And I guess then you could make sure you mention them in your intercessions later on as well.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I always remember in Hartlepool, this is about 300 years ago, when I had my first pastorate, and the local vicar, Stephen, had some fabulously creative ideas, and he came up with the idea one year in doing harvest, and I think I think I had a conversation with him about it, and he was talking about saying, well, we often remember other people who do good in our communities, but we limit it to nurses and doctors and police officers, maybe. We have a very sort of restricted set of people who are sort of on our side, the other carers, ambulance workers, and those are the people we pray for. And he said, well, no, what we're going to do is this harvest, we're going to take all the local people and businesses around Stratton, which is where the Anglican, his parish was, and we're going to invite them to be part of the harvest and bring whatever it is that they are involved in to the harvest. And so one of them was a plumber, and they had sort of a toilet, I think, and they just, everybody bought something that was representative of the thing that they did in the. And I thought it was just such a fabulous idea to involve the whole community in saying, we're all in this project. We're all striving for something in this project, and if we're not against, then we're all on the same page, we're all in the same place. And for him to try and embrace that, I think, was just such a visionary thing that I've never pulled off myself, but I will be trying it one day. So when there's an appropriate occasion, to take that seriously. But I mean, it extends across to climate change, doesn't it? We don't need to invent Christian climate change. Let's just go and join with the energetic young people who are already leading the way. We don't need our own expressions of these things. There are allies, and allies is quite a good word, I think, for young people nowadays, particularly with the LGBTQI. One of those letters is Plus. A for allies. So I'm sure at some point there's an A in there for allies. Yeah, Robert.
Well, I just love that. The plumber, the person on the checkout at Tesco, the unsung heroes. But those, because certainly in communities like Tesco, and the nasty big Tesco, but all those people who work there help. They're part of the community. I think that's a really good idea. I think you could make a really positive service out of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's Stephen's idea. So yeah, well done, Stephen. I'm sure you're listening out there. Stephen Taylor, I think he's somewhere higher up now than he used to be in the Anglican Church. But I'm sure Stephen's listening, as is almost everyone in every denomination. So thank you, Robert. Lythan, where were you thinking of going, preaching-wise, with these texts?
Well, we could do a focus on prayer using James, because James talks about all different sorts of, are you cheerful? Pray. Are you sick? Pray. Are you worried? Pray. Are you whatever? Pray. And confess and pray for each other. Pray for healing. He kind of mentions every single sort of prayer in there, and I think that could be a really good conversation about prayer. And again, if I was in a small interactive congregation, I think that's probably the one that I would focus on. But I know that I'm not for this Sunday. It's the first Sunday in my new role where I'm doing a whole service, and it's a church anniversary service. So when I first looked at these readings for a church anniversary, I thought, oh no. And then I stopped panicking and had another look. And I think actually there's a lot in Mark that might help about church anniversary. So the first thing I'd want to say that we've kind of covered is it's not just us. We're not the only people here working for the kingdom. And actually, the more we can be in partnership with others, there are two great things about that. Number one is we're not trying to do things all by ourselves, because we won't do them. We'll do them better together than we will on our own. And the other is it's the missional opportunity to be salt and light. Rather than going, the church is doing this, but if we as individuals are talking about why our faith has led us to do things, we are evangelizing, really. And that's the easiest way to be missional, is to get involved with other people doing that. And also, I read David Lowes is another of my favorite people that I go to, and he suggested that maybe you could say rework that first sentence and say, we saw some people, Lord, who were here casting out demons, working for justice, caring for prisoners, advocating for LGBTQIA+, working to make this an anti-racist society, climate change protesters, and all of these in your name. They don't follow us. In fact, we disagree with some of them, but we didn't try to stop them. They gave us a cup of cold water, and that was cool. And I like that idea of going, we can understand that other people are doing work, even if it's not something we feel comfortable with or even totally agree with. And to use again Carolyn's phrase about working for the public good, we can embrace and celebrate that. So that's a very big point, number one. Point number two is it doesn't have to be big. As long as you give a cup of cold water because you bear the name of Christ, that's all it has to be. That's not a grand gesture, is it, to give someone a cup of cold water? It's one of the simplest things of all. So when we're thinking about what does it mean to be people of faith, sometimes it is being the ones who lie down in the middle of the road to protest climate change. Sometimes it is being the one who will step up and stand alongside someone who's Black, who's being racially abused. Sometimes it's much simpler, and that's the first step, is to be ready to offer the cup of cold water. And the third thing is that we're called to be salty. And again, that goes back to my favorite passage about being salt and light, or bringing out the God colors and the God flavors of the world, as it says in the Message. And that we're called to be people who make life tasty, who bring out, God's love in everything. And because you don't want to mix up the cold water and the salt, because then it's not very pleasant. But that's, those are the three things to say. But I would also then use this to talk about safeguarding, because I think we don't get that many times in church life to talk about safeguarding and preach about it. But it's saying, if we don't treat safeguarding properly, if we don't give it the due care and attention it deserves, we are being a stumbling block, not just for little children, although that's a good focus to start with, but for vulnerable people of all ages. And I think just saying, you know, sometimes we feel like what we're being asked to do is a huge mountain for something small, but actually the more we grumble about it, the more we're turning ourselves into that stumbling block. And by giving care and attention to what we're asked to do in terms of safeguarding, actually is one of the most important things that we can do.
Yeah, I found myself with a bit of a conundrum with the safeguarding and stumbling blocks, because I was thinking of how you might talk about stumbling blocks and lay out the church with obstacles around it, but then that wouldn't be very safe, would it? So I thought, now I'm going to run up against safeguarding, so people are going to be tripping up before they get in their pews. But yeah, no, I think you're wise there. There's a bit of mileage in just thinking through that phrase, stumbling blocks or road. I like the word roadblocks, to people's development in faith, maybe, because there are all sorts of directions you could take that as to how the church has done that over the ages, couldn't you? What roadblocks have we thrown up? Well, what roadblocks haven't we thrown up is probably, you know, we've thrown up more roadblocks than you could possibly. It's almost impossible to get there, isn't it? Sometimes trying to get out of Cranbrook at the moment is quite tricky with the roadworks that are going on around here, and you've got to go around diversions, and the church has made people take the most ridiculous diversions. You could do a whole roadworks analogy, couldn't you? In fact, I'm working on it now in my head, down that track of what has the church made people, hoops, to mix metaphors here, what hoops has the church made people jump through in order to get to what Mark is talking about. And also I thought with prayer, you started off thinking about prayer, Lithan, and you could talk about prayer. It is striking how James goes on about prayer here, but I kind of found it striking that alongside this talk of prayer, most of what he's talking about with prayer here is community prayer, not private prayer. He's talking about the church praying. It's a praying community that he's talking about. And so when somebody is sick in this community that James is describing, they don't go away and come back when they're better. The community surrounds them, so you're not sort of hiding away in shame because you've let everybody down by being ill. The community gathers around, and the same when you've sinned, which I think is interesting. One of the commentators I said wrote this: being sick and having sinned show that you've fallen prey to just the ordinary vulnerabilities of human life, and you've failed. Your bodies let you down and your spirits let you down, and they're similar in some ways. And in both of those things, the person doesn't go away on their own and in shame and then come back when they've worked it out. The community gathers round. It's a praying community that is there for when its members are vulnerable. So I thought there's kind of a bit of meat in that. Yeah, Nathan.
And I mean, that's kind of how I would always want church. My dream of church is that we'll gather together, and in a bigger church, I guess you'd have to do it in groups, but just to go, you know, I've had a really rubbish week this week, or I'm devastated about something, or I'm feeling sick, or I have done something terrible, and that people feel that it's a safe space to make themselves vulnerable enough to admit those things that need prayer. So we can, quite often we'll do the cheerful ones, but the suffering, the sick, the sin, the wondering what the heck's going on with life, we tend to hide away because we feel like we can't admit how we're feeling because that makes us look weak. People will think worse of us, but wouldn't it be wonderful if church was the place of healing that you could come to and felt it's a safe place without judgment for me to share exactly how I am, so that we together will pray for all the people there. And you'll know you're not on your own, because someone might go, well, you know, my week's been rubbish, and someone else will go, yeah, actually mine's been really bad as well, or someone's been sick and someone else says, oh yeah, I've had that same kind of thing, and that you can get support and prayer together. So maybe I will use that for a church anniversary, because there's a good vision of what it means to be the people of God together in James.
Yeah, Robert.
It struck me that the readings I focused on, Mark and Numbers, were people wanting sort of going, banish those individuals because they're doing the wrong thing. And then James is saying the opposite, or how Lithin's reading James is saying the opposite, that we're together, you know, and things might go wrong and you might get things wrong, but we're together. And I was also struck. We spent a year worshipping with the Salvation Army a few years ago when our church was being redeveloped, and they have this mercy seat. And it struck me that I'm not sure how that came about, but there is a sense in which you felt that people would go to the mercy seat at the front to say, like Lithan said, you know, this has happened. But then from somewhere has come this element of, well, you go and confess your sins and you're shamed in front of the whole congregation, which is why people don't want to do that sort of thing, isn't it? It's become this culture. You don't show your weakness because you'll be shamed for it. And yet, if you do get a group, which I think is your ideal, of supportive people, and you are able to do that, I think it's a liberating experience for everyone, and it's exactly what we should be doing, so that we can support each other.
Yeah, and I think that is absolutely what James is describing. He's describing that kind of community, what it should look like, a place where I mean, it's a place. We're shying away from it a bit because we're talking about it's the place where you can go and say you've had a terrible week. But no, it's the place where you can say you can go and say you have sinned. You've let everybody down. You've been looking at porn. You've been, and whatever it is, you know, stuff that people would never dream of saying in public because it is so shameful. You could say in this environment because it's the place where other people will confess. Other people will say, yeah, you know, my life's the same. We're all sinners in need of bread or something. Whatever the phrase is. So, yeah, Robert.
Why are you able to do it? Because they're people that you feel safe with, and so it's something about we constructing or building a community where people feel safe and that they belong and they're valued. And I always had this image of Jesus as being somebody that people felt drawn to and felt safe around. I don't know if that's right, but that's always been part of my image. And in a lot of it, you know, why did people just follow him? It wasn't just about what he said, it was something more. He was a personality that drew people to him and they felt safe, secure. So if people feel safe and secure, they're much more likely to be able to reveal their weaknesses. So I think we have a responsibility to try and make our communities that. I don't know how we do it, but anyway.
I think it's the thing it reminded me of when I was reading James was Alcoholics Anonymous. And the culture that surrounds an AA meeting. I know this because it's kind of become almost like compulsory now in TV programs that one of the characters goes to AA, and it's almost replaced church. I think in some. I've been thinking about this a bit recently. So why is it that in TV dramas, there's nearly always somebody who goes to AA and people understand what AA is about and they talk about the terminology of AA, about the 12 steps and having a sponsor, and it's in books and it's in films. It's just everywhere. And the idea of having a sponsor, so you're in AA and you've fallen off the wagon, you've been boozing, you ring up your sponsor and you say, look, I've failed, and your sponsor is there. Your sponsor comes around, your sponsor's been through it, your sponsor will sit you down and say, yeah, let's start again. And we'll take them back through the steps and we'll say, yeah, let's start again, this is day one. And I just think that is absolutely, completely and totally what James is talking about, is what church should be. The place where you do confess this stuff, and not because it's a pulling your hair out thing. It's because it's the right thing to do to help reorder your life, and to help build a community of people who know who they are. And AA, I think it's just got a ton to learn from AA. Robert, you were going to say something, I think.
Well, I mentioned last week the congregational clergyman who went down in a ship with the men. He was part of what was called the Oxford Group, which was a Christian movement based on the idea of absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. And that group inspired Alcoholics Anonymous.
There you go. There's a link. We're saving that up. And it all came together.
Yeah.
Lithan.
I did in fact write an essay about the theology of Alcoholics Anonymous for my MA, so I shall have to dig that out and see what else I said about it. I know there's something about I talk a lot about welcome, that when you get to an AA meeting, even if you're late, people will always say, we're really glad you got here, rather than at church where they go, what time do you call this? And other things. So I'll have to think about that. We haven't talked much about what you ask for, God might give you more than you expect. So with Moses and the people, suddenly there's hundreds of helpers. And in James, the one he talks about is Elijah, who manages to stop the rain and then make it go again. Well, it's God does that, but Elijah mentions it in prayer. And that sometimes, it is only a cup of cold water, but at the same time, when we ask God, sometimes we'll get more than we expected as part of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think I don't really know how to handle that with congregations. I've always found that difficult, especially this stuff like Elijah was just human and he could stop the rain. You think, but then it wasn't 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were just preaching about Jesus stilling the storm. And that's a mark of what God does. And teasing that out, I think, is quite difficult. It's quite difficult to say that without saying, yes, it wasn't Elijah amazing, or isn't the God that Elijah worships amazing? And trying to tease that out is quite difficult. But I think we can't just ignore it, can we? As you're right, it says that right in the middle of that passage there. The bit from Numbers I liked. Sorry to just change the subject slightly, was Moses talking, and as I imagine quite a number of people who watch this or listen to this are almost by self-selecting church leaders of some sort, will find echoes of their own words in Moses saying, what have I done for you to give the burden of this people to me? God, what have I ever done to you to deserve this church? And then I says, I'm not their dad. I didn't give birth to them. What have I done to deserve this? Why am I responsible for these people? I certainly remember you, Lithan, coming back from at least one church saying, I'm not their mother. But it's a very familiar thing, isn't it? When you're sort of like, you're the collecting point for all of these moans and everything, and you think, why? Who made me in charge? What have I done to deserve this? I don't know whether preachers might want just to have a smile. If you're also a church leader, that even Moses felt like that about the people that he had been charged with leading. So let's take some comfort from that. I don't know where maybe you wouldn't put that in your preaching. You would be saying, oh God, why have you given me this congregation? Goodness sake. But I certainly allowed myself to smile at that. But he does go a bit far, doesn't he? It's a bit of a drama king. Put me to death at once. For goodness sake, if this is all there is, put me to death at once. I've had enough. Seems a bit extreme.
I have said similar things.
Yeah.
I want to go and work in a supermarket.
Yeah.
Going back to the AA and stuff, but about where is it in James? Bringing the wanderer home. You shall know that whoever brings back a sinner from wandering will save the sinner's soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. And I've just put under there, bring the wanderer home. And I kind of thought, yeah, there's something about communities, and there's something about all the stuff in the New Testament about going out to find the lost one. I sometimes wonder how careless we are as churches about people who have left or people who've gone, and how far as a church community or a family we actually will go to bring people back, to bring the wanderer home. And it's not, I suppose that's not just referring to the wanderer who's wandered away, who was once a member, but just genuinely see that in incorporating people into this community, we're bringing people home. I think is a more positive way of looking at it than sort of grabbing people in an evangelistic going out to snatch people from behind the wall and drag them through the door. We're actually bringing people home. But I also thought there's a tension in this. On the one hand, James is about defining what the Christian community is about. We've talked about that, and that's there's tons to say about what a Christian community is like. But in doing so, you then create a tension with who's in and who's out, don't you? So you get all this stuff like, oh, there's people out there doing this in your name. And the more you try to define tightly a Christian community, then the more you find yourself putting up walls around it. And the more you find yourself, well, there's people out there doing this, but they're not part of us. Yeah. And there is a tension. It's not a new tension. It's an age-old tension between being serious about who you are and defining your community and having a culture as a community, but not being exclusive. And there are no easy answers to that, are there? But I think this is expressing some of that struggle, because there's people outside it who aren't following the stuff that, the fabulous stuff about being a praying, caring, confessing community. That suggests small. In fact, even the way that you were describing it earlier on, Lithan, you said, if I was in a small congregation, I'd do that. If I was a big one, it'd be more difficult. You'd find a way to do it. But I think there's a tension in these readings about defining a community and not becoming an exclusive community that's too defined, which I haven't got the skills or brain to give an easy answer to, but I also suspect there isn't an easy answer to it, and it's a constant struggle, but something we need to be aware of as we wrestle with this stuff. So there we go. Robert,
I was just thinking about what you were saying, and I was wondering about the fact that it was all relatively new then, and they were trying to set things up. So there's that desire to be a community, to build a community where things are different now, and perhaps there's an element of trying to hold on to community, and instead of looking forward. Culturally, community in our churches sadly is about looking back and pining for things past. And I always tried to think of the stuff we did together that built us up was purely in order that we could go out and be community, beyond the wall, so to speak. So try and break down the walls in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's.
I do, but I think that's another thing about preaching is that it's good not to have easy answers, isn't it? But not to just think, well, I won't mention that bit, but to address it and to talk about it and to get people to try and think about it.
But I think that's a really creative way of breaking down that that tension, Robert, and opening up other possibilities. Is where is this community? Because you're right. I think when we talk about church community, we think about a close-knit group of individuals who huddle together inside a building. But I don't know whether that's what James is talking about. There's some. I don't think we're 100% really clear exactly what James's community was, but I think there's a kind of suggestion that it was a sort of struggling community, struggling to define itself against opposition, which does create one kind of community, doesn't it? That is a lot more focused in on itself because it feels threatened and pushed by the world outside it. And I don't know whether that's what the church feels nowadays. I don't know. Do we feel threatened and pushed, or we just feel ignored? I don't think if most churches feel under threat, they just feel completely ignored and passed by the world outside. Yeah, Lithan.
Which brings us beautifully back to Mark's reading, which says, don't feel like it's a competition. You know, everyone's working for the kingdom. You're not Elijah when he goes, you know, to the cave and goes, there's only me left, it's just me. And God goes, don't be ridiculous. It's not just you, it's not all about you. There's other people there as well. And I think to have these readings together is such a gift, because we can say, you know, it's not just about what we're doing on our own. It's important for us to create that safe space of community that enables us to flourish, but that doesn't mean so that we stay within our walls. It's about, you know, looking to then how do we work together with others for the kingdom.
Marvelous. Yeah, so there's lots to get our teeth into in terms of preaching, but there's other stuff that we can do. As Lithan has said, this is our first big service with everything, not just preaching. So all ideas welcome. Robert, what have you come up with?
I'm just rushing to look for something. No, it's just something Lithan said about going out beyond our walls. Right, screen share. How do I do this? Share screen. This famous picture. Share. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Got it.
Starry Night.
My favourite.
Yeah. So why are the windows in the church dark? That's the thing we were told, because everybody's out in the community. That was what you made me think. Oh, I've lost all my stuff now. Right. And then I thought about. Are you seeing that as well?
No.
Why I'm screen sharing? Why can't you see that then? Stop share.
We're still seeing your other one. But while you're finding that I did read an old story once about a village that built a brand new church, and they employed a swanky architect who designed this fabulous church, and they all went to church for the evening service to launch it or something, and they got there and it was pitch dark. And he said, I haven't put any lights in. Where's the lights? There's no lights. He said, no. The idea is you bring your own light, and then when you go, you take it out with you. And I thought, I haven't been able to find that. I've sort of looked for it for you because he tells the story better than I do. But they're supposed to bring their own light and then take it back with them, which I thought was really nice. It was a similar kind of thing to that famous painting.
I can't work out why I can't share my screen with you. But the other thing, there's laughingbird.net. And he does rewritings of the passages. And I like the thing from Mark. He says, I'm not kidding when I say that even if all a person does to support us is offer you a drink of water because you're associated with me, they'll get a thumbs up from God, just like you. And there's a picture of a glass of water. I like that. And I was thinking about this idea that we're in it on our own. This is sort of going back to the beginning, and about how no, actually we're working alongside lots of other people, and we're all in it together, and we've all got our part to play. So you were talking about the idea of harvest and involving lots of people. And I did think about that film Wonderful Life with James Stewart, who my wife can't stand. I think it's wonderful. And the idea of seeing society, how it would have been without you, and what that would look like in order to say, actually, you do make a difference. And then there was, I don't know if I dare try this. Well, you can look for it, Phil. A song called Wonderful Life by a band called Black. And it just, I thought, instead of being negative, this could be quite a positive service about that we all bring something and we're all in this together, and we don't need to feel put down. We don't need to feel we're on our own, that there are all these other people along with us. And actually it is a wonderful life to live. You know, that's so
I like that.
where we're going.
Yeah, because I think quite often what happens when people come to church is that they do the opposite. They think, oh, my life's rubbish, I'm awful, I'm not worthy, and look at all these saintly people around me, and they get the opposite, don't they? And then as they get into church life, new people come in who then look at them in the same way and say, oh, my life's nothing compared. Oh, look at so and so, they've got it together, they're Christian, and it perpetuates itself, and I think without even realizing it, we live into that image that we project about ourselves, and we may be talking positively and not even realizing what we're doing about our own lives, and then people next to us thinking, yeah, but I can't compete with that. That sounds like perfect. They pray every day. They're involved in all these fabulous community organizations. This is a super spiritual Christian, and I'm nothing. And it's kind of the opposite of what James is talking about, isn't it? The culture that unknowingly and certainly unintentionally, churches often create.
One other thing. I'll try share. Can you say that?
Here we go. Yes.
Yeah.
Blessed are these hands. Like the idea of everybody's hands together. It's a poem about help. Really, I just thought that was rather good. I won't read it out. You can see.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Blessed be these hands that have become knotty with age.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of hands activities you could associate with that. You can type in the word hand and craft, and I'm sure you come up with 1,000 ideas of stuff you could do with hands. Listen.
Right, let's share sound. I think, Robert, this is the picture you were trying to put up.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
That's from Anne Scull, and Anne Scull does mustard seeds.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But her blog is always worth a look at.
Yeah.
So she created the image and put all of that together. And I just thought, that's something, just that whole cup of cold water, there's a lot to play with. Do we have a cup of cold water at the front and sip it and not let anyone else have one, and then say, or perhaps as I'm doing communion, do we have bread, wine, and a sip of cold water? There may be all sorts of things we can do with that. But then I'm going on to mostly musical things. So one idea would be to use the hymn, There's a Spirit in the Air, which I first came across in New Church Praise. Pause for those who are old enough to get all nostalgic about the funny little pink book that we had. And there it went something like this. Which is nice, but this version
it's already better.
There's a spirit in the air, telling Christians everywhere, praise the love that Christ revealed, living, working in our world.
Isn't that just so cool? Oh, sorry, I can't stop them now. Right, there we go. And it's just a reminder that, some churches would not let you do that, but playing around with the rhythm of some of the older songs, that's Brian Wren, so it's fairly contemporary, but just doing something like that can lift the words and the music and just make them brighter. And a book where that's done a lot is Hymns for the People. My copy's really battered. At one point on Amazon, they were about £100. So it was a gold mine. but there's one on Amazon at the moment for about £3, which is much more sensible. But this is a fabulous book where the idea is that because people don't sing in harmony anymore, what you can do is have a great backing, so piano or other instruments that slightly change the rhythm, that mean that the songs are refreshed. And one that they do that to is What a Friend We Have in Jesus. There is an awesome, is it Ella Fitzgerald or Aretha Franklin's? I think it's Ella Fitzgerald doing a blues version of What a Friend We Have in Jesus, but it's non-copyright. So I think all of the versions of it on YouTube have gone. I once put it in a service and YouTube took it off because it's not copyright. But I found a version that uses the accompaniment from this book for What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And I think singing it as a blues soul song just really helps it become even more important. So here we go.
What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer.
And so on. But I just think it does make a difference doing that.
Yep, that's a really nice book, and some really nice arrangements in there that make me want to learn to play the piano one day. I know I never will. Fortunately, Lithan can't. So there we go. I just come up with a couple of videos for this week. So I shall show you what they look like. Here we are. And this is really just for Robert. That's the first one. Robert, I put up a post this week about dissing the Grand Prix, knowing that I would draw attention from somebody. I wasn't expecting it to be Robert, although I suppose I should have realised it might have been Robert. I thought it might be somebody else that came, but Robert fell straight into it. There we are. So this is really as an apology to Robert for dissing the Grand Prix. And I was kind of talking a little bit, thinking through this phrase about putting obstacles in people's way. And the one thing for these squirrel things, and this person has done like a spoof of the Grand Prix with squirrels trying to get to the nuts. And this is Hamilton. What's his first name?
Lewis.
Brian. No, Lewis. I think this is some version of Lewis Hamilton about to approach the obstacle course.
And I've just heard that Lewis Scrambleton's approaching the start grid. There you see the race officials doing their final track inspections. And here comes the countdown. Looks like Lewis needed a jump start there. He's approaching the tyre change, a little too cautiously to my mind. But he's through, and he's onto the first of two straights. Beautifully handled there. He's really getting to grips with the track. Lewis got off to a really good start, but the pace has slowed a little bit here. If he's going to beat Shimmy and against the clock, he's going to have to get his game face on and choose the right direction on the track as well. Hang on. Oh, he seems to be upping a gear. Yep, he's into his top gear now. Comes out of the straight. Watch out for that oversteer. Recovers it well. And he storms into the hairpin bend. What a performance. He needs to watch out for that adverse clamber that, again, he takes it with ease. So much so, he's right on the tail of Team Red Squirrel. Let's check the time so far while Lewis has a nut stop. And he's on 1 minute 10, but time is ticking. Precious seconds are drifting away. This must be the longest nut stop ever. Stop that nibbling, mate, and get a move on. Oh, hang on, he's moving now. He's beaten the Reds, only to take on water for his last lap. Just the tunnel and final straight to go. Come on, Lewis. He enters the tunnel. Obviously taking it easy to avoid any last-minute upsets, but the clock is ticking. Oh no, tragedy! Lewis has spun off the track. What's he going
Oh dear, poor Lewis. So it has a succession of squirrels, all with puns of racing drivers. But yeah, this was obviously introducing the theme of putting obstacles in people's way, fairly obviously. And the other one, this is maybe a bit more of a side, a bit of a tangent maybe, but I sometimes think in worship, sometimes leave people to come up with their own stuff, introduce an idea, and then leave people to come up with their own stuff. I was thinking about this idea of the community shaped in prayer, and I was wondering about using this video and turning the sound off the video, which I will do, but then having some words over the top that you could write. I'm not going to write them for you. I'm lacking in imagination, but write some words or introduce some ideas as the video is playing about how, as a community, your church community is shaped or could be shaped by prayer. And it's just a potter with his wheel. So I will mute the sound, and you get the idea. As you're watching this clay being shaped, you're saying, oh, hang on there, I think probably you might want to start it a bit later on, because his early shaping is a bit rude. Oh no, that's probably not a great place to start. Depends on your congregation, I suppose. So maybe you want to skip forward to this bit here. And then just watch the potter's wheel. Some of them will go back in time to remember their childhood in the BBC potter's wheel. But watching that being shaped and talking about a congregation being shaped, how are we shaped in prayer, might be for the creative people in your congregation who don't respond as well to logical arguments with words. Sometimes it's nice just to use an image of something being shaped. I'll just show you what he makes. He's making a pot of some sort. Oh no, that's another one. He's starting again. There we are. He's making a big ridged pot. That's what a congregation looks like when it has been finally shaped by prayer. The end. And the other thing I thought, maybe a bit radical, some congregations. Buyer beware. But it strikes me that if we're preaching about James and being a praying congregation, we could spend a lot of time talking about praying and talking about healing, or we could actually do some praying and some healing for people. Different congregations will have a different culture surrounding how this happens publicly, but surely if there is an opportunity in church life, this reading is an opportunity to think about how you might incorporate an idea of congregational healing or prayer for healing into your regular worship diet. How would you do that? There's loads of ways of doing it. So settle on one that you think your congregation would respond to, and only you know that. There's more than one way of doing this, but you've got the imagination to think it through. How would you achieve that? Or maybe slightly more simply than going straight into for healing, simply praying for each other. How often do we say to people, I'll pray for you this week? Or we put in that, will you all pray for Mavis this week? No, why do we actually stop now and we'll pray for Mavis now? Or, and instead of saying, I'll pray for you this week, no, I'll pray for you now. We'll all pray for you now. Let's just stop here. And we'll pray for Rodney. And I just think that's just a lovely thing to do. And to do it, not make such a giant big thing of it. You could do it just during notices or church news. So I've heard that Rodney's had a difficult week. Shall we just pause for a moment and pray for Rodney and just do it? Just go for it. I think people can just be so massively lifted up by that experience. As long as you're just aware of what you're saying about Rodney that he might not want you to say about his condition, but obviously you're sensitive worship leaders and have already thought that through and are ahead of me. So I just think if this isn't an opportunity to actually do some healing and praying rather than talk about healing and praying, then you're probably there's not going to be another one. So there's some ideas outside of preaching. Is there anything that anybody has occurred to anyone that they want to say before we finish? No? In that case, we have been talking absolute worship. and we face the task that you do of bringing these texts alive for our congregations this coming week. And we hope that something that we've said or half said has sparked that little bit of insight or idea that you need for your congregation to bring these words to life. To dedicate you and ourselves to this task, Lithin is going to lead us in prayer.
I'm blessed because we haven't really talked about Psalm 19, but it ends with the perfect words for this situation. So let's pray. Loving God, let the words of our mouths, the meditations of our hearts, the crafting of our services of worship, our preparation of the word, our thinking about all the aspects that there are, help us to find our focus and do it well. And may these things be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen.
Amen.